Hey everyone, we are back. It is another week. We are grateful that you guys are here. Thank you so much for joining us. I am excited. Excited. It's Monday, and oh my gosh, is it a Monday? Woo, woo,
It is a Monday. This
woo,
is
woo.
this is absolutely true.
It's a saucy Monday, is what it is. So, my goodness, my name is Brenda Neckbottle. I am Brenda, the HR lady, and my partner in crime,
Very
right
good. I'm not gonna.
there. Ooh, I got it.
I always get it wrong.
It's Suzanne Lucas,
Oh,
who's
I got it
you
right.
did it. That's right. Who's also known as the evil HR lady. And
That's the
we
point.
that's right. So somewhere between Virginia and Switzerland, we'll get it together here. So
That's right.
seeing as how we are, I'm flashing up for you guys our social media sites where you can find us if you want to connect with us. And we're just happy to be here. How are you?
Well, as you said, it's a Monday. It's a cold and rainy Monday, and our COVID numbers are out of control. So we're getting all sorts of new restrictions, and I'm a little bit cranky.
Oh, everybody's COVID numbers are out of control right now. So
Uh, Ours are really out of control. We had as many cases as the US the other day, and we're a country of 8 million.
Yoo-hoo. All right. Well, hey, you know what? We're getting through it, and that's the most important thing. So
That's the most important thing.
that is the most important thing. So today we're going to talk about the word no. When
Yes, and
eh,
our theme of just say no October.
that's right. It just kind of like happened that way. We didn't plan it.
Theme.
We didn't plan it. But what happens when the world and everybody in it says no? Because we run into that stuff.
It is true. In the past 3 weeks, we've talked about us saying no to other people, and now we're going to flip it. And what happens when people say no to HR? And what do we do? Because people do say no to us. They
Yeah,
should.
yes, they do. And it goes beyond, well, did you get that paperwork done that I asked you to? No. It goes beyond that. We're talking about like the serious no comments that we get that we just have to, find a way to deal with and handle and manage. So, and we all run into them. So, who would like to kick it off? You or moi?
I think you should kick it off with your federal contractor
My
question.
big one? Okay.
Yes,
So,
let's start with Gary.
that's right. So my first no is going to be talking about what happens when the government says no. And for those of you who are federal contractors listening in, this is what I'm talking about specifically because I see this so many times. And it's happened to me even when I was in the seat. So, for instance, let's say, for example, you have an employee who has made a mistake and you are a sub on a prime contract, or you are the prime contractor and your employee has done something to where the government, in whatever form or fashion it is in, more than likely it could be physical security, it could be whoever the project manager is working on a secured site overseas, whatever, all of a sudden notifies you that your employee or is no longer permitted on the work site because they've done something and they don't want that person on the contract anymore. Well, what I see happening is that normally everybody's number one response is like, okay, well, that's too bad. You're fired. And it's like, whoa. And it's usually done without anybody conducting any form of investigation, without working with the government to better understand exactly what happened, why it happened. Can we work with the person to improve their performance or anything like that? They just go, okay, well, the government says you can't be on the contract anymore or you can't be on the property. We're done. Well, you could have an employee who falls under an EEOC protection. And if release that employee without actually really analyzing your risk, you are literally lining yourself up for a lawsuit. And I'll give you an example. Years ago, I had a client who had a pregnant employee that worked for the Pentagon, and she was physically on site at the Pentagon. And The parking for the Pentagon, there's a lot of it. Let's just put it that way. And so she was assigned a spot way far away in her third trimester. Well, she was starting to experience difficulties. She had communicated this to the employer, and the employer said, well, we'll get back to you on it. Well, what she was requesting was just simply, it's the easiest thing that could have been done. And that was changing her parking spot so it wasn't so much of a walk for her, because her legs and her ankles were starting to, they were suffering from some circulation issues. And so she just simply asked if she could get a closer parking spot. Well, she came in and wasn't really thinking and was upset and emotional, which is usually what happens when people don't think. And so she parked closer to the Pentagon in an area that she was not authorized to park in. Pentagon PD came over and said, ma'am, you can't be here anymore. You need to park your car. She gets upset, yells at the guy, says, I'm pregnant, blah, 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 having all these problems. And he says, I'm sorry, you have to park in your designated zone. So she begrudgingly goes and does it, and then still hasn't heard back from the employer. So the next day she comes and she parks in an area that she's not supposed to. And what do you think happened?
Oh, I bet it did not go over well.
This is a post 9/11 era that we're living in. And it was, about 10-ish years after 9/11 took place. Well, the client got a phone call from the Pentagon saying she's off the contract. They said, well, what happened? And they said, well, she's violated our security policies and she needs to be removed. She's in her third trimester. You can't just separate from a pregnant person. It doesn't work that way. And so because the employer, she reported it, she requested it, and they did not do anything to accommodate her, do you think she was likely protected?
I would think she should have been. I mean, they should have at least gone through an interactive process with her, and maybe it wasn't reasonable. I don't know. Pentagon is Pentagon.
And they didn't do it. Well, no, they didn't do it. And it would have created significant issues with her health. And so they didn't engage with her. They just released her from the contract, and then they called me to see what they would need to do. And I said, well, what you should have done is put her on, had her work from home and then contact me. They said, well, we don't have anything for her. And I said, then you better figure it out. You better find a spot, because she's got enough to make a problem for you.
Did she tell her company or the Pentagon people that she had the issue?
Both.
Both.
Did
So
she?
her company was on notice that she was having this issue.
Her company acknowledged it, but didn't do anything about it.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
I
So
mean, what they should have done is been like, okay, have your doctor fill out this form, and
but
then
they didn't do that.
They didn't do it.
Nope. They didn't do it, or they didn't say, okay, so let us work on this, and I'll talk to you in about 2 hours. I mean, this was an easy fix, believe it or not. Even though it's the Pentagon, it was an easier fix than not acknowledging it. And yeah, so they released her, and I said, well, I hope you know a good attorney.
You're like, sucks to be you. Sorry.
It is what it is. It's like I can't fix something that you've already broke. Yeah, I can only be there to support you. So anyway, that's a good example of what happens when the government says no, is that, the government can remove anybody. Remember, the government is going to put you in a position that says you need to adhere to this law, and then they're going to put you in a position where you're about ready to violate it. Right? That's just how it works in federal contracting. So, every CEO, every company is going to have to assess whether or not they're willing to take on a certain level of risk as it pertains to working with the government.
Well, that's really the thing. And if you don't know enough in advance, someone saying, no, you can't have this employee here, like you said, this was an easy fix. And actually, this is one of the things that I see over and over and over again, is that things that really have an easy fix get blown up because people aren't willing to do the simple thing. And, we spoke last week about a company that wouldn't buy somebody a printer, and ended up getting sued and losing at the EEOC. It's buying a printer is an easy fix. And this is something, when people come back to us and say no, often we can come up with an easy fix. An easy fix would have been give her a parking pass or let her work from home or um, both of those things are easy. And I have to laugh because when I was pregnant with my second, who was a monster sized baby, 10.5 pounds when he was born.
Whew.
um, yeah, he was a dainty little thing. um, he's now 12 and 5'10" or maybe 5'11". He grows like every time he's gone. um, I went through the same parking battle with my employer, but I had the advantage of I worked in the labor and employment law department. And when the facilities people, well, it was actually the nurse, we had an on-site nurse. She's like, pregnant women should walk. And the head of labor and employment law got her boss on the phone, and then I had a parking pass.
Imagine that, right? So,
Imagine
well,
that. Thanks, Larry.
but and what I find with government contractors is that, they go to what I call is the shallow water answer. And that simply means that they immediately go to, well, we're not going to be able to, if we keep this person on, we won't be able to bill for it. We can't get in, we won't be able to invoice the government. All of her, allowable expenses, right? And they just immediately go there without thinking through. It's like, you know what? We actually have a talented individual here who we might be able to move to another contract, or we might be able to do something with, or blah, 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 right? They don't spend those moments thinking through things. They're and that's one of the challenges of federal contracting is that you have to have cheeks in the seat, and in addition to that, um, you know, depending upon the terms of the contract, you may actually be required to get approval from the government prior to actually hiring somebody. So if they don't approve somebody you're second best, it just makes it more complicated. And those are the things that the contractors are trying to avoid having to deal with. The problem is they don't, by thinking in that shallow term, that shallow end of the pool, mindset, you're not looking at you're not looking at the grand picture. And that's where the biggest risk is.
And that's something that I think HR can do really well is look at the broader picture and say, look,
Mhm.
I'm not focused on one employee or one contract. I'm focused on the whole company.
Right.
And this is a liability that we're putting ourselves in. So let me speak up when you've just turned around and said no to me.
Yep.
I think that's a really important role of HR and a role that often people forget. It's one of the reasons why we say don't fire anybody without coming and talking to me. It's not that we want you to have bad employees, but you need to understand the broader picture. You need to know what's going on. And you may not know that a similarly situated employee just did the same thing a week ago and didn't get fired. And so
Yeah.
now we're opening ourselves up.
Yep.
And we can give that broader perspective if we know what's going on. And this can
Right.
actually be a problem in big companies where you have a lot of things going on that people may not necessarily know. If you're a single HR person, then you should have that broad picture, but people got to tell you.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes when people say no to you, you've got to go, wait. This is a problem.
Right. So that was my no. What's your no?
Well, my no is not nearly as dramatic, but my no is more a general thing that HR people face all the time, which is we come and say, look, if we invest in training or we invest in this or we invest in that, we'll be able to lower our turnover. We'll be able to have higher employee engagement, blah, blah, blah. And the CEO, finance, they all say no. And then
Mm.
we get yelled at, why is our turnover so high? And we're like, well, because we're not training in that was a good eye roll. Training and developing anybody.
Sorry, did I do that out loud?
This is an advantage of mask wearing because with masks and my glasses, like sometimes I might be able to hide my emotions.
I didn't do a very good job of that, did I?
But it happens, right? They say no.
sorry.
And then they want to know why things didn't work out. And you're like, because I told you it was not going to. And this can be really difficult and really frustrating. And as HR people, we are aware, we should be aware that there isn't an infinite amount of money. So it's not like finance is cruel and heartless when they don't want to implement our new, I don't know, $5,000 training program per employee. That's like, that can add up. I wish someone would pay me to come to a $5,000 training employee
Per employee.
per employee. But those things exist. If you're going to have, we're implemented new software, we're going to send everybody to Atlanta to go through training. That's a lot of money. And sometimes we can argue, well, look, it makes a lot more sense to send people out there and get real training because nobody here knows how to do the software rather than doing it internally and have it be bad. But what we need to be able to do is speak that language of finance, and also be able to quantify just how expensive turnover is.
Yeah.
And this is such a hidden expense,
Yep.
that it's really hard for people to do it. And I can't tell you the number of meetings I've been in where we've argued about the cost of turnover, like what goes into it. It's not a cut and dry thing. There's not like this formula that you put in and come up with the exact cost. I can tell you it's expensive, but we need to be able to stand up and defend ourselves, but we need to do it in a way that's professional and maintains relationships. And then we have to accept no at the end of the day.
Yep.
If they're gonna do it.
So I've got another government no, and that is, it's a indirect-ish kind of no, kind of thing. It's not a direct no, but something that's really hard for people who, especially those who are just coming into this field of study, is that just because it's fair doesn't mean it's legal. And just because it's legal doesn't mean it's fair.
This is true.
Yeah. So that's a real challenge. And you know what? It's not just limited to HR people. It also includes the managers, it includes the employees. And when you're faced with that kind of no, you've got to be able to influence and persuade people to jump on your bandwagon. And that is so not easy. But if you have spent a lot of time building your personal relationships and your professional relationships, and you've demonstrated a level of character and integrity that people will quickly realize that this isn't you being a tyrant wench, that they'll understand that you're probably up against the ropes somewhere. And you can even come out and say, hey, listen, we're up against the ropes on this one. We don't have a lot of latitude. And then do enough education. And I don't spill out everything that you know, and in the effort to try and get people to understand, because they're not going to begin with, but give them enough education to where they can acknowledge what you're up against, possibly, or respect what you're up against and why the decision has to be made. They may not still necessarily like it, but at least they'll respect the angle that you're coming from. Because if you give people too much information, you don't want to put people in a position to turn around and use that same information against the company. So that'll make your job a lot harder.
It is that balancing of relationships that I think is really, really critical. And this is something that many, 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 many years ago, when I was just a young little HR seedling, the head of HR for the company I was working for, our senior VP, she went on this kick about getting the paperwork right. And her thing was, if we're messing up people's benefits, if we're messing up these little tiny paperwork things, it doesn't matter how brilliant we are on our business partners and our employee relations people, nobody is going to trust us.
Yep.
And if we're dealing with a large HR, which this was a Fortune 50 company, And, we had 300 HR people that reported into her, plus other site things. Anyway, people tend to think of HR as like one person, no matter what. And so if your people can't do the data entry right, they're not listening to the business partner, even though the business partner had nothing to do with the data entry. They just assume, oh, HR is incompetent. And so you've really got to build those relationships. And of course, in smaller companies, it is you. It's the HR department of one or the HR department of two, and you are directly responsible for all of that. So when people push back and they don't trust you because you did the small things wrong, that's a problem. You really need to build those relationships, and you need to take care of those things that are no fun. Nobody likes paperwork, but it's got to be done right. And then once it's done correctly, then they'll listen to you when you have ideas about employee engagement or about succession planning or things like that. And those things are really important. And it's that relationship building that you have to have so that you can have a fruitful back and forth discussion. And it's okay for them to say no and for you to say no, and then to come to an agreement. The CEO has the veto power, of course, but one thing that I've noticed recently with this election going on, we're not talking about politics. I just want to say that people tend to say, no, it's all or nothing. And if you disagree with me, then I need to fight against you. Disagreement doesn't mean contention. It just means we don't agree. So we need to have these civil conversations. And then if the CEO or whoever's got the purse string says no, we got to get in line. I mean, there are some moral issues, of course, where maybe you have to stand up and say, no, I can't do this, I'm quitting. That happens. But if it's no, we're not going to do this training program. Okay. So now I need to find another solution. And that's an important thing to do.
Yeah. You also had another really good no too that I think we should jump over, as I really liked it. And that's what happens when a manager says no to HR.
Yes. And managers often say no to HR. And then this question is, it comes back to A, the relationship before, and B, how trustworthy you are. Because so if a manager comes to you and says, I'm going to fire this person, and we say, no, you don't have any documentation, whatever their infraction was, it's a minor infraction, or frequently it's just that you don't have any documentation. Your performance appraisal that you wrote last month rated them highly, and now you're saying they're incompetent, and the manager says, well, I didn't want to hurt their feelings when I did the yeah, that happens.
Sorry, did I do another eye roll again?
Another eye roll. I didn't want to call attention to it, but yeah. It happens, doesn't it, Brenda?
It does. You hear it all the time.
Yeah, and you're like, well, because firing them doesn't hurt their feelings. We have to push back against this no. And generally, when it's not the senior executive, when you say no, people listen. And a lot of people feel like HR has a veto power, which is great. That's how they should feel. But they're going to have to escalate it. So when they come to you and say, no, I'm going to do this, we need to explain, okay, here's the reasons why not. And you need to now go to your boss. And I will come with you. We will go together. Or in today's virtual world, we will Zoom together.
But we'll zoom in on it.
We'll zoom in. But you're going to have people pushing back. And there's a lot of things people push back on. And, some of those things are government required. We started with the government saying no, but a lot of times managers and employees want to say no to you against things that the government is requiring. Like, I don't want to go to sexual harassment training. Well, in some states, Nobody wants to go to sexual harassment training, but in some states, it's required that you do this annually or every other year, and it's required that you sign everybody off on it. So suck it up, sweet cheeks. That's good sexual harassment. Hey, sweet cheeks.
Hey,
Time,
sweet.
yeah.
Suck it up, Buttercup.
Yeah, that's better.
That's
Suck it
so
up, Buttercup. You got to go.
Yeah.
And that no that they give us, we need to push back on that and be like, this is not an option. And
Yep.
I'm not the big bad meanie that's saying you have to do this. This is your state legislature. Take it up with them. But until that point, you're going to sit your butt down and you're going to go through this training and you're going to answer the little quiz questions so that I have documentation that you were told not to comment on your coworkers' body parts.
Yep. Yep. No, I love it. Those are awesome points. And these are things that, we all see on a regular basis in this field. And, there's just things that you have to constantly work through. It'd be nice if they were resolved once and forever, but that's not the case.
And it's never going to be the case because we're the human side of the business, the human resources, and people, we come in all different flavors and opinions and ideas, and we got to deal with that, and we've got to deal with it in a productive manner in which we don't breed contention.
Yep. Nope, I agree. That's awesome. This was a good conversation today. This was a good topic.
It's a good topic.
I like that one. Okay, so we are to the point where Suzanne and I conspire against each other.
Conspire.
And we come up, we kind of, it's like almost kind of turned into a contest now. And I'm probably the one that dropped the gauntlet first, but we each get asked a question from the other person of which we don't know what the other person is going to ask. And every time we find our questions and Suzanne goes, you got one for me? And I'm like, oh yeah. She's like, oh, you make me nervous. So,
Brenda always makes me nervous.
I know. It's a big reveal because I know what pulls her chain. But she knows what pulls mine too. So anyway. All right. So last couple weeks I went first. Are you ready?
Sure. All right. Here's my question for you.
Yeah.
And this is a question that came in on my Facebook group. So if you want to read and see other people answer,
I don't know if I saw it or not, but go ahead.
All right. Well, maybe you saw it.
Go for it. Go for it.
We had an employee start this morning at 6 a.m. He went through his initial safety orientation with our safety manager, who starts at 6. When our admin, who was going to get him started on his new hire paperwork,
can you slow down just a little bit, because it's awfully fast coming from Switzerland. Sorry.
I will slow down.
Go ahead.
We had an employee start this morning at 6 a.m. He went through his initial safety orientation with our safety manager, who starts at 6.
Okay.
When our admin, who is going to get him started on his new hire paperwork, went to get him at 7:30, we discovered he had walked out. We have no information from him in order to pay him for the 1.5 hours he was here. How should I handle this?
So this is a hindsight 2020 situation. I had something similar to this happen. I've had employees walk out in the middle of their orientation. The company I'm thinking about specifically, all of our orientation was online. And so this person just for some reason decided that once they were starting to go through their training, they'd done all the paperwork and everything. This was not for him. So he just up and left. Didn't tell me about it. It dawned on me that I hadn't seen him for like 2 hours. And I went to go to the computer to find out if everything was okay. And he was gone. Even though he knew how to get a hold of me, where I was, right? It happens sometimes. And no explanation whatsoever. So, lessons learned, right? In a world of so much technology today, my recommendation would be find a way to get all of your new hire paperwork either done in advance or done electronically. So that way, when somebody comes in, and you set the expectations with managers that nobody gets them until you're done with them. So as an HR pro, you do all of the onboarding first. Once onboarding is done, then you can transition an employee over to wherever it is that they need to go next. Because managers, they're just like chomping at the bit to get the new person in, get them trained, get them up to speed, because that's one thing that they don't just, quite frankly, they need the help and they don't want to worry about it. Nobody has a stronger investment in a new employee outside of HR and the new manager. And so the rule that I have always put into place, whether people like it or not, is that they don't get a chance to start doing anything until I'm done with them. And that means that I get all of their I-9 stuff done. It means I get them into the payroll system. You just do a stronger job of setting the expectations around what should happen during orientation and onboarding, and you'll be in a much better position. You won't have that problem. So to answer the pay related question is that you can pay that individual the estimated amount of time that you think that they stayed. However, if you didn't do any of the paperwork, there's no way that you'd be able to really fully get them into the system.
And that's a problem, and you're going to have to track them down.
If they even respond to you.
And this is something that happens. And I used to work in retail, and this happens quite a bit.
A lot more than you think. Yeah.
Well, and working HR in a grocery store, people don't realize how much work grocery stores are. Like, if you think it's an easy job, it's not an easy job, man. You are on your feet.
Yep.
And you are doing a job while you are dealing with customers, and people walk out.
Yep.
And I think you're really smart to be like, let's fix this problem from ever happening again by doing the paperwork first.
Yep.
And especially like you were saying with I-9s and stuff, you want to make sure that before that person goes to work for you, that they're actually legal to work.
Yep. So that's what I would do.
Excellent.
All right, you ready for yours?
I am.
I'm glad you're sitting down for this one. Okay.
Oh dear.
Here we are. My former employer fired me. And again, this is a question coming from the perspective of an employee. My former employer fired me after learning that my husband and I both had cancer. His was terminal. The owner made me come in 2 days after his funeral, and then he fired me. This is a former HR professional, by the way. Would you proceed with this lawsuit? No disciplinary issues.
Yes, I would proceed with the lawsuit.
And hence, please tell us why, so everybody else can follow.
Questions that are important to know. One of them is, how many employees does it have? Now, this is an HR person, and most people don't hire an HR person as one of their first 5 employees. So we're probably at least subject to the Americans with Disabilities Act if we have 15 or more. And if we have 50 or more, then we're subject to the Family Medical Leave Act. And a lot of companies that have at least an HR person have 50. Some start, of course, smaller. But so we're going to assume that at least she's covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act. And the fact that she and her husband have cancer, we're looking at some flat out discrimination based on disability. Technically, you're not required to give people bereavement time. There's no law requiring bereavement.
Nope.
Heavens, people, please give bereavement time, and lots of it. I mean, I can't imagine losing a spouse or a child or a parent on a Monday and having to be back in the office on Tuesday. Like, that just is nuts. But legally, that's not the issue. The issue here is that even if just her husband had cancer, this might be a retaliation against her based on disability association.
Right.
And because she also has it, it's just the disability. And yes, I would tell her to find herself an employment attorney.
Labor attorney. Employment attorneys for employers. Labor attorneys are for employees.
I always just say employment attorney either way, because they don't necessarily identify themselves as labor. But You want an employee side attorney.
There you go.
And you don't want the guy that helped you closing on your house or incorporating your business or whatever. And
Does
I
your
see
taxes.
this all the time, that people will get their brother-in-law or whatever,
Yeah.
and the brother-in-law doesn't want to say, I don't know anything about employment law.
Right, exactly.
And some little thing I learned from my former boss, who was an employment attorney. We were in Pennsylvania, and she got a new job in New Jersey, and she needed to pass the bar again in New Jersey. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how are you going to do that? I'm like, well, what percentage of the bar is labor and employment law? And she goes, 0. It's not on the bar. So she had to go back and review all of this other stuff. If you're not a labor and employment lawyer, you don't know anything about employment law. You didn't have to study it to pass the bar exam, at least according to Mary Beth, who was brilliant. And of course, she passed the bar with no problems. But, it had been 20 years since she's taken it. They don't know what they're talking about. And so, yes, I would absolutely. And the big thing here is probably health insurance. You're on the company's health insurance, most likely, and that's something that you need to get yourself covered on. Cobra is really expensive. And another thing from the employer side of things is, even if this was 100% legal, this does not play well on social media. And
Or in the media.
or any media, it doesn't play well. Employee with cancer goes to attend her husband's funeral, comes back 2 days later and gets fired. That does not play well. So even if you're not looking at it from the legal standpoint, the business really needs to be prepared. But yes, my vote is that this woman gets herself a nice attorney and kicks some legal hiney. And I wish her all the best, dealing with her own cancer and going through the grief of losing her husband.
Absolutely. Good answer, ma'am. So we've got something cool coming up. If you haven't registered for the virtual summit taking place November 9th through the 13th, you can do so by jumping on our website at therealhrshow.com. And it's right there up on the front of the page. You can go ahead and hop on and, get what you need out of this. We have lots of really great speakers. Suzanne's going to be kicking it off, followed by Tay Nelms, who is a former human resources for the Bellagio Hotel, as well as Treasure Island. And then Steve Watson, awesome guy. He's a CFO and founder of Trend Breakers. And Steve absolutely loves to solve the math problem when it comes to figuring out how to save companies money as it pertains to their business. And then I'm going to be joining in Wednesday and Friday as well. So, but you can get to us sooner if you'd like. We have 2 groups that we lead and that we shepherd. I like that word, shepherd. And you guys are welcome to join in and jump in. And Suzanne, you want to tell them about your group?
Sure. So it's called Evil HR Lady. We're on Facebook, and this is a public group. So just a reminder, you don't want to post your social security number because people will see it. And we talk about all things HR. We ask questions like the one I asked for Brenda, and everybody jumps in. We're really a support for people who are an HR department of one. We're your coworkers, and plus we share the best HR memes and news stories that make your eyebrows curl or whatever. That you're like, holy crap, what were they thinking? In terms of employment, not just general Kardashian. Of employment news, and everybody is welcome. It's predominantly HR people, but there's a lot of people that just like talking about business too.
Yep. And over in my group is the Next Gen Women in HR. We are solely dedicated to HR. Everybody that's in the group is 100% HR. We don't have anybody else hanging out in there. And like Suzanne's group, we do get involved in helping each other solve each other's issues and problems and HR challenges. Plus, we also do a lot of other fun things too. We've got free webinars that come up. We share tools and information. Both resources, Suzanne and I actually are both in each other's groups, and we are active with each other. And supporting one another. And it's a lot of fun. So not only do we help each other, we actually like each other too.
There you go. Come on over, join both groups. And yeah. And if you have anything that you'd like to see covered in one of these Real HR shows, you can also ask us through Facebook or through any of our contact information that Brenda is flashing or did flash on the screen.
Flashed a few times, and we'll do it again here real quick. And we are coming down to the close of the day. Well, this session, your day, our session. Since you're over in Switzerland.
It's 4:57 p.m. here, but I still have about 6 hours of work to do today.
Welcome to the work and home environment.
It's a Monday. It's a Monday. Right.
So we will see you guys next week here on the Real HR Show on our YouTube channel. And thank you and don't forget to subscribe. And if you know somebody who's in HR, please make sure that you share this with them, because it's very likely that they might get some pretty good information from it. So thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.